Welcome to today's podcast. In this episode, we will explore profound lessons from Buddhism on how to understand life and suffering. One of the essential teachings in Buddhism is that everything in life has a reason, even though sometimes we cannot immediately comprehend it. Our lives are filled with ups and downs, moments of joy and happiness as well as times of sadness and suffering. And often, we wonder why these things happen to us. Why doesn't life turn out the way we expect? This can be a big question we spend a lifetime trying to answer. However, according to Buddhism, nothing happens by chance. Everything occurs for a reason. So, what are the reasons behind every event, whether good or bad? How can we recognize and find peace in every challenge life brings? That's the topic we'll explore in this podcast episode. Everything has a reason. In Buddhism, one of the fundamental principles we must understand is that everything has a reason. This viewpoint suggests that nothing happens by chance and that every event in life has a cause and a purpose. This opens up a new perspective on our experiences in life, whether they are happy or sorrowful. You may wonder, if everything I go through has a reason, why do I have to endure such hardships? It's true that we can't always immediately understand why bad things happen. However, Buddhism teaches us that these events are not merely bad, but are opportunities for us to learn and grow. Every event in life, whether joyful or painful, is connected to certain causes and conditions. This is known as dependent origination in Buddhism. When you view life through this lens, you no longer feel that life is meaningless or that you're stuck when faced with challenges. Instead, you can find meaning in the difficulties and understand that every experience offers a lesson, an opportunity for growth. For example, when you face a significant challenge at work or in your personal life, instead of feeling hopeless, you can see it as an opportunity to explore your inner potential, to understand more deeply about yourself and the world around you. It's precisely in these challenging moments that we can learn patience, how to let go of attachments, and most importantly, how to find peace within our own minds. Buddhism doesn't teach us to blindly accept everything without reflection, but rather to investigate and understand the causes behind life's events. When we understand the reasons behind everything, we can respond to it more positively. Everything that happens, whether it seems difficult or a failure, is a part of our journey of growth. It could be a lesson to help us let go of attachment, face our fears, or even become more compassionate toward others. We will dive deeper into this concept in the next segments of the podcast. But first, take a moment to reflect on your own life and consider which past events may have provided valuable lessons that you didn't realize at the time. Conclusion of this section. We've just explored the concept of everything has a reason in Buddhism. By understanding that every event has a cause and purpose, we can find peace within ourselves when we face difficulties. The awareness of dependent origination allows us not only to live more proactively but also to adjust our minds and emotions in every circumstance. Stay tuned for the next part of the podcast, where we'll discuss impermanence, anicca, and how to live peacefully with the realization that everything changes. Impermanence, anicca. Now that we've explored the profound concept that everything has a reason in the previous section, we can delve into another central Buddhist teaching, impermanence, anicca. This teaching goes hand in hand with the idea that nothing in life is accidental or without cause. In fact, impermanence is the very foundation of why things change and why events unfold the way they do. Understanding impermanence. Impermanence, or anicca, refers to the fact that all things in life are in constant flux. Nothing, not even our emotions, our relationships, or our bodies, stays the same. Everything is subject to change, whether we like it or not. This includes everything from our thoughts to the physical world around us. Our lives, just like everything else, are constantly changing, evolving, and moving toward their natural end. At first glance, the idea that nothing lasts forever might sound like a sad or pessimistic statement. However, when we truly understand anicca, we realize it is a deeply liberating truth. The struggle with change. One of the core reasons for suffering in life arises from our resistance to change. As humans, we often struggle with the notion of impermanence because we want things to stay the same. We desire stability, comfort, and certainty. But the reality of life is that nothing remains unchanged. The things we cherish, the relationships we hold dear, and even our own health, everything is in constant motion, moving toward transformation, decay, or rebirth. When we hold on too tightly to what we value or try to control everything, we create suffering for ourselves. For instance, when we become overly attached to material possessions, our careers, or our relationships, we set ourselves up for pain when those things inevitably change or fade away. This is because we tend to identify ourselves with these things as if they define who we are. This resistance to change is one of the major sources of human suffering. It is not the change itself that causes pain, but our unwillingness to accept it. The more we resist, the more we experience frustration, anxiety, and ultimately, suffering. Embracing impermanence for peace. The teachings of anicca invite us to embrace the truth of impermanence and learn to live with it rather than fight against it. It's not about accepting change with apathy, but with wisdom. When we accept that change is inevitable, we can begin to let go of our attachments and find peace in the present moment. Buddhism teaches that the path to peace is not found in clinging to the past or fearing the future, but in accepting the present moment as it is. By letting go of our attachment to the idea of permanence, we open ourselves to experience life more fully. The present moment becomes all the more precious because we realize that it too will eventually pass. The beautiful thing about anicca is that it also offers us the opportunity for growth. When we acknowledge that everything is in a state of constant change, we can begin to adjust our perspective. Instead of fearing the unknown, we can learn to adapt and respond skillfully to the changes around us. Practical application of anicca in daily life. One way to apply the principle of impermanence in our daily lives is by practicing mindfulness. In every moment, we are encouraged to observe the ebb and flow of our thoughts, emotions, and external circumstances. When we do this, we can cultivate an awareness that nothing remains static. Our thoughts and emotions are not permanent, and neither is our external environment. For example, if you're feeling stressed or upset about something at work or in your personal life, remember that this too shall pass. Just like a storm, your difficult emotions will eventually settle. Similarly, if you're experiencing happiness or success, don't become too attached to that feeling, for it too is temporary. Learning to embrace the impermanence of both good and bad experiences can help us stay grounded. We can enjoy the present moment without clinging to it and let go of the fear that comes with change. The liberation in impermanence. By embracing anicca, we are not just accepting that life is fleeting, we are also freeing ourselves from the grip of attachment. When we stop trying to hold on to things that are inevitably changing, we stop creating unnecessary suffering for ourselves. This is where true peace lies. In accepting the ever-changing nature of life, we open ourselves to experience it more fully without fear, attachment, or regret. In the next part of this podcast, we will continue exploring more teachings from Buddhism, particularly the law of karma, and how our actions, words, and thoughts are deeply interconnected with the impermanence of the world. Thank you for staying with us, and remember, each moment is unique, just like us, constantly shifting, transforming, and presenting opportunities for growth. Conclusion of this section. The teaching of anicca, or impermanence, reminds us that change is the only constant in life. By accepting that everything is in a state of constant flux, we can let go of attachments and find peace in the present moment. This understanding frees us from suffering, allowing us to approach life with a sense of acceptance and wisdom. Karma, cause and effect. After understanding the principle of impermanence and how the constant change of all things affects our lives, we continue to explore another fundamental teaching in Buddhism, karma. This is a concept that, when understood correctly, helps us free ourselves from attachment to temporary things and gain a deeper awareness of our actions, thoughts, and speech. Karma and the invisible connection. The concept of karma in Buddhism is not about reward and punishment. It is not a system where good actions are rewarded and bad actions are punished. Instead, karma is a natural process of the functioning of the universe. Every action, speech, and thought we have creates results that we will experience. This principle operates like a continuous chain of causes and effects, where each action has an impact on us and others. Karma is not something that comes from an external source or from a supernatural power. Rather, it is the natural outcome of the interaction between our actions and the world around us. Similar to impermanence, when we accept the concept of karma, we realize that nothing happens by chance in life. Every experience has its cause, and we are the ones who create that cause. Intention as the key factor. A crucial point to highlight is that intention behind each action is what truly creates the result. This is what makes karma both complex and powerful. Two people may perform the same action, but if their intentions are different, the results will differ. This explains why sometimes we may face unfavorable circumstances despite doing good deeds. For example, if someone helps another person but does so only for praise or expecting a reward, the act of helping may not yield as positive a result as someone who helps with compassion and sincerity. Thus, intention is the deciding factor in the quality of the result because it reflects our true mindset towards the action. Karma and impermanence. The connection between karma and impermanence is very close. As we explored earlier, everything changes and nothing remains the same. This also applies to the results we receive from our actions. While the effects may come to us long after the action has been performed, they are not permanent or unchanging. The results of karma also undergo transformation because they are subject to other factors and the ever-changing context of life. This also means that not all the suffering we experience is the direct result of a bad action in the past. Some effects may come from our present actions, and what is important is to always be mindful of how we act and think. Just like with impermanence, the results of our actions can be transformed if we change our behavior in the present. The ability to change our destiny through actions and thoughts. One of the beautiful aspects of the teaching of karma is that it is not fixed. We can change our destiny by changing our actions, words, and thoughts. If your current life is not as you wish, it is important to realize that you have the power to change your situation by transforming your behavior and mindset. Thus, karma brings hope and the ability to change, rather than being a fixed fate. When we practice mindfulness and become aware of the impact of each action, thought, and word, we become more awake in how we interact with the world around us. As a result, each of our actions not only creates a result for ourselves but also influences others in profound ways. This does not mean that we can avoid all suffering, but at least we can create better conditions for ourselves and those around us. Transforming suffering and learning to accept the results. Accepting the teaching of karma is not only about understanding that every action creates a result but also about the ability to accept and learn from whatever comes our way, whether joyful or painful. When facing difficulties or suffering, the important thing is not to blame or avoid it, but to recognize that these challenges are part of the learning and growing process. Suffering and hardship are not punishments but opportunities for us to reflect on our actions and make changes. For example, when you face a difficult situation, consider what you can learn from it, and find ways to improve your actions and thoughts to avoid creating negative results in the future. Accepting karma is a way to grow through every challenge life presents. Applying karma in daily life. One of the ways to apply karma in our daily lives is to always live with awareness of our actions. Think carefully about the motivations behind each decision, each word, and each action. If we act from a mindset of love, compassion, and integrity, the result will be peace and happiness. We can also apply karma when facing challenges. If you are confronted with a difficulty in your work, family, or relationships, ask yourself, what in the past led to this situation? What can I do to improve and change this situation? Thanks to karma, we understand that everything has a cause, and every action in the present can create positive changes for the future. Liberation through karma. Buddhism teaches that when we live mindfully and understand karma, we will no longer be driven by impulsive actions but will live a life of responsibility and meaning. We will no longer fear the unknown or the hardships of the past because we understand that we are the creators of our future. By changing how we act and think, we not only change the present but also create a better future for ourselves and those around us. Conclusion of this section. Karma is not a fixed fate, but a natural process that we can actively change by altering our actions, words, and thoughts. Every action creates a result, and we can improve our destiny through awareness and mindfulness. Attachment and suffering. Building upon the concepts of impermanence and karma, we now turn our attention to a key factor in the Buddhist path, attachment, tanha. While impermanence teaches us that everything is in constant flux and karma reminds us that our actions, thoughts, and words create natural consequences, attachment often complicates our journey by binding us to things that are fleeting and impermanent. This attachment is the root of much of our suffering. In Buddhism, it is often said that attachment is a cause of all suffering because it prevents us from truly understanding the nature of reality. The nature of attachment. Attachment arises from our desires and cravings for things, people, and experiences that give us temporary satisfaction. We attach to material possessions, relationships, achievements, and even to our own identities or beliefs, hoping that these will bring lasting happiness. However, as we've learned from impermanence, everything changes, and nothing lasts forever. The objects of our attachment, whether they be people, things, or concepts, are also subject to the law of impermanence. When we attach ourselves to these fleeting things, we inevitably encounter disappointment, loss, and suffering. But it's important to recognize that attachment is not always something that happens consciously. Much of the time, it's subtle, formed from the way we perceive the world. We become so wrapped up in our desires and the things we want to hold on to, that we lose sight of the fact that change is the only constant. And it's this misunderstanding of change, this inability to accept the reality of impermanence, that leads to suffering. The cycle of attachment and suffering. Let's connect this to what we learned earlier about karma. Our attachments often arise from past actions, thoughts, and desires that create our present reality. These attachments lead us to make decisions and act in ways that keep us bound to the cycle of suffering. When we hold on to things that are impermanent, whether it's the hope of eternal happiness in a relationship or the desire to keep accumulating wealth, we reinforce the belief that happiness can be found in things outside ourselves. As a result, when these things inevitably change or are lost, we feel betrayed, hurt, and empty. This cycle of attachment and suffering is known as the samsara, the continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, where we remain trapped by our desires and attachments, unable to find true peace or lasting happiness. Every time we experience loss or dissatisfaction because of attachment, it reinforces our mistaken belief that if only we could hold on to things more tightly, we would find lasting happiness. But, as we know from the teaching of impermanence, holding on to things only leads to pain, because they are not meant to be permanent. The suffering of attachment. To illustrate this concept more clearly, consider a simple example: a person who is attached to a romantic relationship. This person might believe that their happiness depends entirely on the other person. They may feel secure, joyful, and loved when they are together, but as soon as the relationship begins to change, whether through conflict, separation, or death, this person may feel as though their world has been shattered. The attachment to that relationship becomes the cause of their suffering because they have tied their sense of identity and happiness to something that is impermanent. The same principle applies to material possessions. Many of us attach great importance to objects, cars, houses, gadgets, believing that they define our status and security. When these things are lost, damaged, or outdated, we experience suffering. This attachment blinds us to the reality that objects in themselves cannot offer true, lasting happiness. They are temporary, and the more we cling to them, the more we open ourselves to the suffering that comes from their inevitable change. Breaking the cycle, the path of detachment. One of the core teachings of Buddhism is that the way to break free from this cycle of attachment and suffering is through detachment, the ability to let go of our attachment to the impermanent. Detachment does not mean indifference or a lack of love. It means recognizing that all things are transient, that they come and go, and that our happiness cannot depend on them. Detachment is about cultivating a state of inner peace, regardless of external circumstances. This is closely tied to the practice of mindfulness and wisdom. By practicing mindfulness, we develop the ability to observe our desires and attachments without being controlled by them. We can witness our cravings, acknowledge their presence, and then let them go. We don't have to act on every desire or craving that arises in our minds. Through mindfulness and wisdom, we come to realize that true happiness doesn't lie in what we own or who we're with, but in how we relate to the world. In Buddhist practice, detachment also involves a deep understanding of the Four Noble Truths, which help us to see clearly that suffering arises from attachment. By understanding the nature of suffering and its causes, we can start to disarm our attachments and let go of our clinging. The role of acceptance. Letting go of attachment is not always easy, and that's where the practice of acceptance comes into play. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation, nor does it mean we should give up on things or stop caring about people or experiences. Instead, it means accepting things as they are, without trying to force them to remain the same or to live up to our desires. It is about recognizing the impermanence of all things and letting them come and go without clinging. Acceptance helps us break free from the constant struggle to control and hold on to things, and it brings us peace when we face change. Suffering as a teacher. In Buddhism, suffering is not something to be feared or avoided, it is something to be learned from. When we experience suffering, it serves as a powerful teacher, showing us where we are attached and where we are clinging to something that is impermanent. By reflecting on our suffering, we can begin to see our attachments more clearly and understand why we suffer. It is through this understanding that we can let go and find peace. For example, the next time you feel pain from the loss of something or someone, take a moment to reflect. Ask yourself, what am I attached to? What do I need to let go of? This reflection is the beginning of liberation from suffering. It is in this letting go that we find true freedom and peace. Conclusion. In conclusion, attachment is the root cause of much of our suffering. Whether it's attachment to people, objects, ideas, or even our own identity, clinging to impermanent things inevitably leads to pain and disappointment. By understanding the nature of attachment and cultivating detachment, we can free ourselves from the cycle of suffering. Through mindfulness, wisdom, and acceptance, we learn to let go and find true peace in the face of change. Acceptance and the path to freedom. As we have explored in the previous sections, the teachings of impermanence, karma, and attachment are fundamental to understanding the nature of suffering in Buddhism. Attachment, as we discussed, arises when we cling to things that are transient, and this clinging inevitably leads to pain and dissatisfaction. But what, then, is the way forward? How can we break free from this cycle of attachment and suffering? The answer lies in acceptance. The role of acceptance in overcoming suffering. Acceptance is not about passive resignation or indifference. It is about coming to terms with the reality of life, with all its ups and downs, its joys and sorrows. When we accept life as it is, we stop resisting the natural flow of change. Resistance is often at the heart of our suffering. When things change, we want them to stay the same. We try to hold on to what we love, fearing loss, pain, and uncertainty. But in doing so, we create more suffering for ourselves. Acceptance, in the Buddhist sense, is about recognizing the impermanence of all things and learning to flow with life's natural rhythms. It is the realization that we cannot control everything, and that trying to do so only leads to more frustration and pain. Instead of fighting against change or clinging to what we wish could remain, we accept things as they are, knowing that all things, good or bad, are temporary. Acceptance does not mean giving up. One important point to note is that acceptance is not about giving up on life or becoming passive. It is not about letting go of our dreams, goals, or relationships. In fact, acceptance often leads us to engage more fully with life because it frees us from the mental burden of resistance and attachment. When we accept things as they are, we are able to approach life with greater clarity, compassion, and wisdom. Take the example of a relationship. If we are attached to the idea that the relationship should never change, we may hold on to unrealistic expectations. When change inevitably occurs, we may feel devastated. However, if we accept that relationships evolve over time, whether due to changes in circumstances, the natural flow of life, or personal growth, then we can navigate these changes with a sense of peace. Acceptance allows us to move with life rather than fighting against it. Similarly, in the face of loss, whether it's the loss of a loved one, a job, or even an opportunity, acceptance doesn't mean we don't feel pain or sadness. It means we allow ourselves to grieve, to feel, but without clinging to the idea that things should have stayed the same. We accept that change is part of life, and through that acceptance, we release the need to control or resist it. The liberation of letting go. This brings us to a key point about acceptance. It is deeply linked with letting go. As we've learned, attachment leads to suffering, but attachment only exists because we are unwilling to let go. We hold on to people, things, and even our own self-image out of fear of losing control or out of a misguided belief that these things define us. Acceptance, on the other hand, allows us to release these attachments without fear. It is the act of letting go, of loosening our grip on what we cling to, that allows us to find freedom. When we let go, we make space for new experiences, new relationships, and new opportunities to arise. Letting go of old attachments creates the freedom to embrace life as it unfolds, without the burden of expectations and fears of loss. In this sense, acceptance is not a passive act, it is an active choice to free ourselves from the mental and emotional weight of attachment. Acceptance and mindfulness. The practice of mindfulness is closely connected to acceptance. Mindfulness teaches us to be present with what is, to observe the present moment without judgment or resistance. It helps us to recognize when we are clinging to something, when we are resisting change, and when we are attached to an idea or outcome. Mindfulness creates the space for acceptance, allowing us to acknowledge our feelings, thoughts, and experiences without becoming overwhelmed by them. For example, if you are feeling frustrated because something isn't going as planned, mindfulness can help you observe the frustration without judgment. Instead of spiraling into resistance or self-blame, mindfulness invites you to accept the feeling of frustration, to understand it as part of the human experience, and then to let it go. This process of mindful acceptance is transformative because it allows you to shift your perspective from one of struggle to one of peace and understanding. Acceptance of what cannot be changed. In Buddhism, there is an important concept called the Serenity Prayer, which asks for the wisdom to accept what cannot be changed. This resonates deeply with the Buddhist teaching of impermanence. Many things in life are beyond our control, and fighting against them only brings more suffering. Acceptance is the wisdom to recognize what is beyond our ability to change and to find peace in surrendering to those realities. For example, you cannot change the past. No matter how much you may wish for things to have turned out differently, the past is fixed and cannot be altered. Acceptance means letting go of any regret, guilt, or longing for a past that no longer exists. By accepting the past as it is, you free yourself from the endless cycle of rumination and emotional suffering. Similarly, there are circumstances in life that we cannot change, such as the natural course of life and death, or the actions of others. Acceptance does not mean we condone or approve of what happens, but that we recognize it as part of the unfolding of life. By accepting what cannot be changed, we stop fighting against the inevitable and open ourselves to greater peace. The power of acceptance in the face of suffering. When we practice acceptance, we shift our relationship to suffering. Instead of seeing suffering as something to be avoided or fought against, we see it as an opportunity for growth and wisdom. As we have discussed earlier, suffering often arises from attachment, from our inability to accept the impermanence of life. But through acceptance, we can transform suffering into a teacher. For example, when faced with personal loss, we can practice acceptance by allowing ourselves to grieve without judgment. Instead of pushing away our sorrow, we embrace it as part of our human experience. This process of acceptance helps us move through the pain without becoming overwhelmed by it. It helps us heal and emerge stronger, with a deeper understanding of life's fleeting nature. Conclusion. In conclusion, acceptance is a powerful tool on the path to freedom. It allows us to break free from the cycle of attachment and suffering, by helping us accept the impermanence of life and letting go of our need to control everything. Acceptance is not about giving up or becoming passive, it is about fully embracing life with all its changes, challenges, and losses, and finding peace within that embrace. The hidden lessons in adversity. As we have explored, the Buddhist teachings highlight the impermanence of life, the law of karma, and the suffering caused by attachment. These teachings guide us towards acceptance, mindfulness, and letting go. However, there is another profound aspect of Buddhist wisdom. Adversity or difficult experiences can often contain the very lessons we need for growth, healing, and transformation. In fact, challenges and hardships, rather than being obstacles, are seen as opportunities to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Understanding adversity in the light of impermanence. The concept of impermanence, anicca, teaches us that everything in life is constantly changing. This includes not just the pleasant and joyful experiences, but also the painful and difficult ones. Adversity, like all things, is temporary. It comes and goes, just as happiness does. However, because we often cling to the idea of permanence, we see adversity as something unfair or undeserved, which amplifies the suffering it causes. We resist it, wishing for it to go away quickly, instead of recognizing that, like everything else in life, it too is fleeting. When we view adversity through the lens of impermanence, we begin to see it as just another experience that will eventually pass. This understanding shifts our relationship with difficulties. Instead of fighting against them or wishing them away, we learn to accept them as part of the natural flow of life. This acceptance doesn't mean passivity, rather, it is an acknowledgement that challenges, while unpleasant, hold the potential for growth and transformation. The transformative power of adversity. In Buddhism, there is a powerful teaching known as the path of suffering or dukkha. While suffering is an inevitable part of life, it is not something to avoid. In fact, suffering has the potential to be one of the greatest teachers we can have. Adversity often forces us to confront our attachments, fears, and limiting beliefs. It shows us where we are holding on to the past, to illusions, or to ideas that no longer serve us. Through adversity, we are given the opportunity to reevaluate our priorities and to choose a path of deeper wisdom and understanding. Consider a difficult situation, such as the loss of a loved one. The grief and sadness that arise from this loss are real and profound. However, this adversity, if approached with mindfulness and acceptance, can teach us valuable lessons about love, impermanence, and the nature of attachment. We may come to realize that our attachment to the person, while a source of great love and joy, also made us vulnerable to the pain of separation. Through the grieving process, we may discover new depths of compassion and appreciation for life, as well as a deeper understanding of the nature of impermanence. Lessons in self-discovery and growth. Adversity has a unique way of revealing aspects of ourselves that we may otherwise overlook or avoid. When everything is going well, we often do not question our assumptions, habits, or beliefs. It is only when we face hardship that we are forced to confront our vulnerabilities, fears, and desires. These are the moments when we are invited to look deeply at ourselves, to examine our attachments and aversions, and to understand the root causes of our suffering. For example, when faced with failure, many of us may initially react with frustration, self-criticism, or a sense of shame. However, through the lens of Buddhist wisdom, we can use failure as a tool for self-discovery. Failure is not a reflection of our worth but a reminder of our imperfection and our potential for growth. It teaches us humility, patience, and the importance of persistence. When we face failure with acceptance, we are no longer victims of it. Instead, we become active participants in our own growth, learning from our mistakes and becoming stronger as a result. Similarly, when we face conflict with others, we may be tempted to react with anger, resentment, or defensiveness. However, adversity in relationships often reveals our deepest fears and desires. Through mindfulness, we can observe these reactions without judgment, and choose a response rooted in compassion, understanding, and wisdom. Adversity in relationships can teach us how to let go of pride, ego, and the need to be right, allowing us to cultivate deeper connections with others based on mutual respect and empathy. The alchemy of suffering. Buddhism often speaks of the alchemy of suffering, the process by which difficult experiences can be transformed into wisdom, compassion, and enlightenment. Just as an alchemist turns base metals into gold, we have the potential to turn our suffering into something valuable. This transformation requires a shift in perspective, from seeing suffering as a burden to seeing it as an opportunity for growth. The Buddha taught that suffering is not a punishment, but a result of ignorance and attachment. Through the practice of mindfulness and insight, we can begin to see the nature of suffering and its causes, and in doing so, we can begin to dissolve its grip on us. The more we understand the impermanent nature of suffering and its role in our spiritual development, the less we will be overwhelmed by it. Instead, we can use adversity as a stepping stone towards wisdom and peace. For example, when we experience physical pain, we may initially try to escape it, to resist it, or to numb it. However, through mindfulness and awareness, we can learn to be present with the pain without judgment. By observing the sensations without attachment, we realize that pain, like all things, is temporary. We can transform our relationship to it, no longer seeing it as something to be feared or avoided, but as an opportunity to cultivate patience, endurance, and insight into the nature of impermanence. The hidden gifts of adversity. In every difficult situation, there is a hidden gift. This gift may not be immediately apparent, but with time and reflection, it reveals itself. The challenge is to recognize that adversity is not merely an obstacle, but an invitation to grow, to learn, and to awaken. The gift of adversity may be wisdom, an understanding of the deeper truths of life that we can only access through experience. It may be compassion, an expanded heart that understands the suffering of others because we have experienced it ourselves. It may be courage, the strength to face our fears and move through them, even when the path is unclear. It may be resilience, the ability to bounce back from setbacks and continue on the path with renewed determination. In every difficulty, there is the potential for personal and spiritual growth. When we embrace adversity with mindfulness, acceptance, and the right understanding, we begin to uncover these hidden gifts. And as we cultivate these qualities, we become more capable of navigating life's challenges with grace, wisdom, and compassion. Conclusion: adversity as a catalyst for transformation. In conclusion, adversity, rather than being a force to be feared or avoided, is a powerful catalyst for spiritual and personal transformation. Through the lens of Buddhist teachings on impermanence, karma, and attachment, we come to understand that difficult experiences are not merely random misfortunes, but opportunities for growth and insight. Mindfulness Channeling. As we've explored, the Buddhist teachings on impermanence, karma, attachment, and adversity provide us with profound insights into the nature of suffering and the path to liberation. One key practice that ties these concepts together and helps us navigate the complexities of life is mindfulness, Channeling. Mindfulness is not just a practice but a way of being, an active, continuous awareness of the present moment. It serves as a bridge between understanding the nature of suffering and actively working to transform it. The power of the present moment. At the heart of mindfulness lies the profound truth that the present moment is all we truly have. This idea connects deeply with the Buddhist concept of impermanence, anicca. As we've discussed, everything is in constant flux: our thoughts, emotions, experiences, and the world around us. The only thing we can truly rely on is the present moment, which, by its very nature, is always changing. Mindfulness invites us to stop clinging to past experiences or worrying about the future. Instead, it teaches us to fully engage with the present, however it may unfold. When we focus on the present, we begin to see the impermanence of all things, not just as a theoretical concept, but as a lived experience. We start to witness how fleeting each moment is, and how much of our suffering arises from holding on to things that are constantly shifting. For instance, when we're consumed by thoughts of the past, regrets, missed opportunities, or past hurts, we are not living in the present. Likewise, when we are lost in anxiety about the future, worrying about what may or may not happen, we are again disconnected from the present. Mindfulness anchors us in the here and now, reminding us that the present moment is the only place where we can find peace. Mindfulness and suffering. Buddhism teaches that suffering, or dukkha, is an inherent part of life. However, The way we relate to suffering can either deepen or alleviate it. Often, our suffering is compounded by our resistance to the present moment. We may wish for things to be different, avoid discomfort, or try to escape from unpleasant feelings. This resistance, this unwillingness to accept things as they are, only intensifies our suffering. Mindfulness, however, allows us to face suffering with a different approach. It teaches us to observe our pain, discomfort, or difficult emotions without judgment or attachment. When we practice mindfulness, we don't try to escape from what's happening. Instead, we allow ourselves to fully experience it, knowing that it, too, is impermanent. This practice of non-resistance can soften the grip that suffering has on us, helping us to process our emotions and experiences in a healthier way. For example, when we experience anger or frustration, mindfulness encourages us to observe the feelings as they arise, without reacting impulsively. Instead of acting on our anger or suppressing it, we acknowledge it. We ask ourselves, what is happening right now? Where do I feel this emotion in my body? What thoughts are fueling this feeling? By bringing awareness to the experience, we create space between ourselves and our emotional reactions. This space allows us to respond more skillfully, rather than being driven by automatic impulses. Mindfulness and attachment. Attachment is another key theme in Buddhist teachings. We attach to things, people, and experiences, believing that they will bring us lasting happiness. However, as we've learned, attachment leads to suffering, because nothing in life is permanent. Mindfulness helps us break free from this cycle of attachment by encouraging us to observe our desires and cravings without judgment. Through mindfulness, we can begin to see how our attachments shape our thoughts, behaviors, and emotional responses. We may notice, for example, that we are constantly seeking approval or validation from others, or that we cling to material possessions as sources of happiness. In observing these patterns, mindfulness helps us recognize the impermanent nature of what we're clinging to. The people, possessions, and experiences we attach to are not permanent, and as a result, our happiness built upon them is fragile. Mindfulness teaches us to let go of this attachment, not through force or suppression, but through awareness. By simply observing our attachments, we begin to loosen their grip on us. We realize that true happiness doesn't lie in holding on to external things, but in cultivating an internal state of peace and contentment, independent of the fluctuating circumstances of life. Mindfulness in everyday life. While many people associate mindfulness with meditation, it is, in fact, something that can be practiced in every moment of our daily lives. In each breath, each step, each interaction, mindfulness can be cultivated. The key is to bring our full attention to whatever we are doing without distraction or judgment. For example, when we eat, we can practice mindfulness by paying attention to the textures, tastes, and smells of our food. Rather than eating mindlessly or while distracted, we fully engage with the experience, appreciating the nourishment that the food provides. When we walk, we can practice mindfulness by noticing the sensation of our feet on the ground, the movement of our body, and the sights and sounds around us. In conversations, we can practice mindfulness by truly listening to the other person, without planning our response or getting lost in our own thoughts. These small moments of mindfulness throughout the day help train our minds to be present, and over time, they can create a deep sense of peace and clarity. The more we practice mindfulness, the more we can begin to live in alignment with the Buddhist teachings of impermanence, karma, and non-attachment. Mindfulness and the transformation of suffering. Mindfulness is not just a passive practice, but a transformative tool. When we cultivate mindfulness, we gain the ability to transform our relationship with suffering. Instead of seeing suffering as something to avoid or escape, we begin to see it as an opportunity for growth and insight. Through mindfulness, we can develop a deeper understanding of the impermanent nature of all things, and in doing so, we become less attached to our desires and expectations. By practicing mindfulness, we start to witness how suffering arises and passes away, much like any other experience. We can observe the triggers of our suffering, and over time, we develop greater control over how we respond to these triggers. We learn to meet life's challenges with greater equanimity, recognizing that suffering is not a permanent state, but a passing wave that we can ride with awareness and compassion. Mindfulness also allows us to deepen our connection with others. When we are present with others, when we truly listen, observe, and engage with them, we build more authentic, compassionate relationships. This connection with others is essential in cultivating the qualities of love, compassion, and wisdom that are central to the Buddhist path. Conclusion: the integral role of mindfulness in the Buddhist path. In conclusion, mindfulness is a powerful tool that connects all the teachings of Buddhism. It helps us see the impermanence of life, understand the law of karma, release attachment, and transform suffering. By practicing mindfulness in our daily lives, we can break free from the cycle of craving, resistance, and suffering. We can learn to live fully in the present moment, with awareness, compassion, and wisdom. Mindfulness is not just something we do, but a way of being, a state of continuous awareness and presence that allows us to experience life as it truly is. Transformation of the mind. From the principles of impermanence, karma, attachment, and mindfulness that we explored earlier, one of the most crucial steps on the Buddhist path to enlightenment is the process of transforming the mind. This process not only helps us face suffering but also allows us to transcend it, leading to a life of inner peace and fulfillment. When we examine life, we see that suffering does not arise from external events but from how we react to those events. This means that suffering is not an inevitable condition, it is the result of how we think, feel, and act in our minds. Therefore, transforming the mind becomes an essential step that helps us liberate ourselves from the cycles of suffering. Suffering does not come from events but from how we interpret them. One of the fundamental views in Buddhism about suffering is, suffering does not come from the event itself, but from how we interpret the event. We can easily see that each person has a different perspective and emotional response to the same event. For example, two people can experience the same situation. One might feel anger and frustration, while the other may feel calm or learn something valuable from the experience. This shows us that suffering is not an objective phenomenon but a subjective reaction of each individual. How we interpret an event, or in other words, how we talk to ourselves about that event, will determine whether we suffer or not. If we view an event through a negative lens, it is easy for negative emotions such as anger, fear, or disappointment to dominate us, and suffering increases. On the other hand, if we learn to view an event through a lens of peace, compassion, and wisdom, we can transform challenges into opportunities for learning and growth. The transformation process begins with awareness. Transforming the mind is not something that can be achieved overnight. It requires us to be aware of our thoughts, emotions, and actions. When we practice mindfulness, we begin to become more deeply aware of what is happening in our minds. Especially when facing negative emotions, we can observe them without getting swept away by them. A clear example of this is when we face anger. Normally, anger might make us react impulsively, saying things we don't mean or doing things we regret afterward. However, if we practice mindfulness and recognize the feeling of anger as it begins to arise, we don't have to react immediately. Instead, we can take a moment to observe and understand the underlying causes of this feeling. Are we feeling hurt, threatened, or simply unfairly treated? When we understand the root cause of the emotion, we are no longer led by it into mistaken actions. This awareness helps us separate emotion from action, creating a space between feeling and reaction. That is when we can choose how to respond in a way that does not create more suffering for ourselves or others. This process of recognition and transformation is a vital part of developing wisdom and compassion, two essential qualities in the Buddhist teachings. Meditation as a tool for transforming the mind. One of the most powerful tools for transforming the mind is meditation. Meditation not only helps calm the mind but also enables us to recognize the impermanence and interconnection of all phenomena within our own minds. Meditation is a process of focusing on the present moment and observing thoughts and emotions, without being caught up in them. When we meditate, we begin to realize that all thoughts, emotions, and situations are impermanent. They come and go, and nothing lasts forever. Through this process, we learn to view negative thoughts, such as anxiety, anger, or fear, not as an inseparable part of ourselves. Instead, they are just phenomena that arise and fade within the stream of consciousness. This realization helps us loosen our attachment to negative emotions, thus transforming them into opportunities for growth, wisdom, and love. Letting go of attachment, anger, and ignorance, the key to mind transformation. Buddhism teaches that the root causes of suffering are attachment, anger, and ignorance. Attachment to desires, anger, and ignorance, not seeing things as they truly are. Transforming the mind involves letting go of these elements and replacing them with understanding, peace, and wisdom. Attachment, desire. The mind of attachment is the mind that constantly seeks fulfillment through external things. Transforming attachment is not about renouncing everything but about not clinging to them and not allowing them to control our happiness. Anger. Transforming anger means learning to forgive, not allowing negative emotions to control our actions and thoughts. When we transform anger, we not only free ourselves from it but also open our hearts to more love and compassion. Ignorance. Transforming ignorance is the process of learning, deepening wisdom, seeing through the impermanence of all things, and living a life with a deeper understanding of the nature of suffering and happiness. Conclusion. Mind transformation as the path to peace and enlightenment. Transforming the mind is a long journey, but it is the only path that leads us to freedom, peace, and enlightenment. When we learn to change the way we perceive and respond to events in life, we not only reduce suffering but also cultivate a mind that is clear, compassionate, and free.